So tell me about some of the cases that you've been dealing with.
Well, if we use an example of a misuse of the recent law, I had a very, very dedicated mother who in fact lived with her daughter until her daughter was about 25, 26. And then, over the course of about a year or two, her daughter tried to cut herself off from her mother. In fact, she had been very ill in the meantime and had, I think, had some psychiatric problems. So, of course, her loving mother was very concerned to make sure she was all right. And during the course of trying to do that, she constantly went round to her daughter's house, but her way was barred. And in fact, she went round 6 or 7 times, and then her daughter's response was to get an injunction against her under the new Harassment Act. And I felt that was a real abuse of the process, and I conducted a very, very tricky and difficult appeal. But what was worrying about that case is that her husband was a very high-ranking civil servant, and of course it probably would have affected his career, because he also was injuncted. And of course we're talking about a quasi-domestic violence type injunction, which is, correctly used, quasi-criminal. And of course there he is, a very loving father, very motivated in life, a good citizen, faced a quasi-criminal injunction on his record. And I think that's very worrying to see that kind of thing happening. And I think it's also very worrying when I have represented people who have been accused of stalking, when in fact what the real problem is, there's been an emotional issue in their life, they've had psychiatric problems, they've been of low esteem, and they haven't been able to cope with a breakup of a relationship. And I think it's very worrying that in a democratic society, we're actually using criminal sanctions to actually, against people who in fact have virtually low psychiatric health and poor self-esteem. So there is a misuse issue here that also needs to be carefully addressed.
That last bit, can we read it? Because I want to include it.
Yeah.
And read it on the phone.
One thing that does worry me, in fact, is the whole use of criminal sanctions when we're dealing with people who often can be ill and can often have low psychiatric or psychological esteem, or can just be emotionally traumatised. And I think it is very worrying when people face stalking or harassment charges in a criminal court when they are in fact emotionally disturbed, and what they really need is help, support, counselling and treatment. They certainly don't need to be hauled through the magistrates' courts in what in fact is a very intimidating and clumsy process, and it does a lot of harm.
Where do you kind of draw the line though? I mean, one of the man, Clarence Morris, who stalked Perry Southall, is seriously disturbed. Now, I mean, how on earth do you stop that without bringing him through the courts?
No, I agree. I mean, what you do there, surely, is that as soon as he's charged with an offence, he's subject to a really tough bail, so he's not allowed near that woman. And if we don't think he's going to respect the bail conditions, then he's the sort of person who has to go in custody on remand. But can I say one thing that's very interesting in that case, and I think it is an important issue, and her barrister was severely criticised in court when he defended Clarence for referring to the way in which she dressed as a woman, and he said that she dressed in a provocative way. And in representing Morris, wasn't it, he actually put that issue in front of the court, and he in fact was severely criticised for doing so. And I think it is very worrying that when we represent our clients, and I represent both victims and stalkers, I'm beginning to become subject to what I call the issue of political correctness, and I don't think that enables me to do my duty to my clients in the way that I'd like to do so. I'm not saying that one should ever be disrespectful. In fact, one should be highly respectful in court and highly sensitive, but I think it is important to be able to speak plainly in court for your client. And if your client finds provocative clothing or dressing difficult, then I think one has to be able to say that and put that case to a jury. And I think it's disappointing that he was so criticised. And I think, again, it was an infringement of freedom of speech and a worrying issue.